Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Cool Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. You've probably heard that those who can't do teach. It's a paraphrase of a line from George Bernard Shaw's play Man and Superman, and it happens to be completely wrong. Not only are some of the best teachers high achievers in their fields, but the process of teaching also sharpens knowledge and skills that teachers reapply to their fields. It's also commonly thought that certain subjects, especially in the arts, can't be taught. They need to be experienced. But is there any truth to this? Maybe today's guest can help us sort it out. Not only is he a prolific filmmaker, but he's also a professor at the USC School of Cinematic Arts.
We're excited to have with us Jeremy Kagan, a director, writer, and producer whose film credits include directing the 1970s box office hits Heroes and The Big Fix, the Chaim Potok adaptation The Chosen, an Emmy-winning episode of Chicago Hope, and much, much more. Jeremy, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Well, where are they? Glad to be here.
Jeremy, your credits go back to the early 1970s. How did you get started in this business?
Accidentally. And by the way, that's actually true. One of the problems when you get asked questions like this is that you end up sort of telling the same story over and over again. And I remember Steven Spielberg, I was asking him, did he learn anything from anybody else? And he said, yeah, he actually learned something from Fellini when he had made his first picture, and Fellini was still alive and he was in Rome. And Fellini said, you're going to be asked a lot of questions. And the thing is, you're going to be asked the same question over and over again. So here's my one piece of advice to you as a filmmaker. Make things up. I was so impressed with the fact that film actually can change awareness as behavior, that I thought, well, I'll do this, and then I'll go back and get my PhD in education and use film for that purposes. But I was in the right place at the right time, and that seems to be much what people's lives are about. That in many ways you get chosen rather than you choose. And when I actually came out to a place called the American Film Institute, again, intending to go back to East Coast and study, Hollywood was in a turmoil. They didn't understand movies like American Graffiti and Easy Rider. These are movies that they thought were C movies that would play in drive-ins, and they were gigantic hits. And they didn't have any young filmmakers. They just didn't have it because Hollywood was a system of going into some training and apprenticeship and moving up. And so they needed young filmmakers. And here we were at the American Film Institute right here in Hollywood. And so I got the opportunity to actually work. And I must say, looking at my students and how difficult it is for them to break into this industry and art form, I was incredibly fortunate.
Speaking of The Chosen, and not necessarily choosing, when I was in Torah school back in the old days, I remember being shown two movies. One was The Frisco Kid, and the other was The Chosen. And these were kind of the two Jewish movies of that generation that at least kids like me were exposed to. And both of these movies deal with American Jewish identities in very specific ways, very direct ways. The Chosen, of course, takes place in 1940s Brooklyn. There's a Hasidic boy and a less religious boy, and they become friends, and it deals with the formation of the state of Israel and all kinds of subjects that I'm sure Hollywood wasn't necessarily hungry for in those days. So what was it like making such an explicitly Jewish movie back in the early 80s?
Well, it was a gift. That's the best way I can say it, because I've been very, very fortunate, again, to be able, because of my association with the Directors Guild of America, I run what's called special projects, and I've been able to interview literally hundreds of the greatest directors in the world. And I've written 3 books based on those interviews called Director's Close-Up. And what I often asked directors is, did you make a movie, or have you made a movie that has changed you? And some of them have responses, and some of them do not. In my case, yes, The Chosen changed me. That's why it was a gift. I'm from Westchester. If any of you are from New Yorkers, you don't go to Brooklyn. I mean, Manhattan, yes, for the plays, but Brooklyn, you might as well go to Irkutsk. Why would you go to Brooklyn? Different today, I know. But at that time, and here I was now, in the various communities, there was something, something there. And this movie allowed me to learn about this. And it was a tough movie to make in the sense of who was going to make it. The book was a giant success in 1967. This movie didn't get made until 1981. Why so long? And the reason was simply, well, there's a certain number of Jews in America, and only 10% of the population goes to the movies, and that's not enough to justify making a movie. So this movie, just didn't get made. But it wanted, interestingly enough, me to make it, and I have told this story a number of times, but because I was sent the script by somebody who was actually a Methodist from New Orleans who had bought the rights to it. I read the script, it wasn't very good, and I passed on it, and 2 years later, I'm contacted by the Landaus, Edie and Eli, great producers, did a number of Jewish movies like Man in the Glass Booth and The Pawnbroker. And they said they were making this movie. They would like me to direct it, which is a compliment. And they had Rod Steiger and Maximilian Schell, great actors. But they sent over the script. I read the script and I thought, wait a minute, I've read this before. This isn't, why are these people making this? I hadn't read the book. I went out, bought the book, read the book, realized it was a masterpiece, and said, let me rewrite this and I'll make it. And it's interesting because there's no studio money, and they had a certain amount of money, and then that fell through. And then I'd heard about a rich sort of Israeli who was interested in movies, and I mentioned his name, and it turns out that he decided he'd find us the whole picture, and that's how the picture got made independently. And I insisted, those days it was expensive to make movies in New York City, and so could we find Brooklyn in Canada? And I said, after going up, I said, no, Brooklyn's Brooklyn. We need to shoot in Brooklyn. And we did. And New York gave us a great break. It was an amazing sort of like a lot of people, I guess, knew the book or knew the idea of the book. And the book is about something really important even right now, which is it's about tolerance. It's about being able to accept differences. It's being able to talk to somebody who has another belief than you and be able to accept them and be able to listen and be able to share. Well, that's a common subject. And I think lots of people who were sort of not from the faith had the faith, let's go make this movie.
So continuing on a very similar thread, The Chosen does a wonderful job of humanizing Hasidic Jews in America in a way that had never really been seen on screen before, including the intergenerational tensions between the rabbi father, played by Rod Steiger, and his modernizing son, played by Robbie Benson. How important was it to you to accurately depict Hasidic life in 1940s Brooklyn?
It was my responsibility to do that. I knew nothing about this world. And I remember that images of, oftentimes, particularly images of rabbis in movies, particularly American movies, they're always sort of stereotypical or cartoon. They're always exaggerated. They never feel like real human beings. And what I gathered when I was, in these homes and with these families was the humanity that they share with, that we all share with, same desires, same needs. And I felt it was really essential to make that happen. And it was fascinating because working with Rod, there was an interesting dynamic that happened because Rod had sort of an image himself that these were sort of these rebbes were almost like dictatorial characters. And I remember telling him a story in which that it touched me. And I said, there's a story about a young Hasidic kid who's traveling from town to town. And he comes to a particular town and he's greeted. And one of the students there says, you've got to meet our rabbi. Our Rebbe is spectacular. He is just one of the most amazing beings. So the young man goes to Shul. They're all davening and everybody's making movies. He looks at the Rebbe. The Rebbe is not moving at all. Hardly anything. You think, what is this? You want to see some shekli? You want to see some what? It's like nothing. He goes to the boy and says, what's so special about your Rebbe? The guy says, go up and touch him. He said, what? Go up and touch him. The guy goes up, comes forward, picks up his hand, and he touches him and said, he's soaking wet. And the young man said, yeah, it's about what's inside. And when Rod heard that, Rod got it immediately. Instead of being thought like this, overbearing leader, he became this incredibly compassionate being. And so, there was an effort to let these people be human and not cartoons. And it's easy to make a cartoon. It's not so easy to make a cartoon, but it's easy to make cartoons sometimes of sort of Orthodox, Hasidic Jews, and you've seen them in the movies, and they've been made in cartoons. And I didn't want that to happen. It was really important that these people be recognized as other and the same.
Right. Yeah. It is remarkable how you avoid caricatures, I think is what you're alluding to. Switching gears just a little bit, you've directed a number of television episodes as well for very well-known series like Columbo, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Picket Fences, Chicago Hope, The West Wing, The Guardian. It goes on and on. I'm wondering what is like the main difference between directing for TV versus a feature-length film?
Speed. It's really about that. Means there's less time, and therefore you have to really be very well prepared, and you have to know your skills. Interesting enough, directing, there's sort of two kinds of television, if you will. There's original television, which means cable movies, limited series, and things like that, where you as a filmmaker have a lot more are being relied on for your imagination and to be able to create a new world. So like Crown Heights, which is behind me, that was a movie that was made for Showtime. And so there's a greater, even though less time and oftentimes less resources, but a lot of freedom in the way you're going to make the movie itself, even if it's specifically for television. When you're doing episodic television, there's a style that already exists. Now, in the case of Medicine Woman, that I happened to do the pilot for Dr. Quinn, so I was establishing a visual style for that. But these others where I was coming in and styles were already there, and your contribution is to be able to tell the story that you're given in a dynamic way and potentially help your actors, who oftentimes obviously know their characters better than you do, but help them because sometimes they don't quite know what the story that the character is doing and what the particular motivation at this moment in this tale that may differ from the one they just did a week ago, and they're working so hard, they need the help. So it's a different kind of alacrity that is necessary. You have to really be able to think quickly on your feet. And so, but other than that, it's still, how do you get somebody to give a good performance? And how do you visually tell a story? And so in that way, it's not so different. And when we think about it now, if you're watching television these days, some of the most original material and some of the most visually stunning material is being made right now for television, more so than for theatrical film. So in a way, there's this kind of blend. And you see, at one time, there was a time where there were television filmmakers and there were theatrical filmmakers, and the two didn't meet. Now there's a weave. People are doing all of it together because in the end, it's still, how do you tell a story really well and catch an audience?
Your subject matter often deals with social and political issues, whether it's Conspiracy, the trial of the Chicago 8, Golda's Balcony, about Golda Meir, or Crown Heights, about the aftermath of the Crown Heights riots. What attracts you to those sorts of stories?
One of my phrases is that facts inform, but stories transform. And I think I was conscious of that very early. And some of the novels and plays that I was affected by when I was young, and also the social movements that I grew up in, from the anti-war movement to the anti-nuclear movement to the present day concerns that we all have right now about sustainability and the survival of the planet. I kind of feel that we all have, again, our role to play in advancing the health of our communities and the health, in this case, the health of the planet. So whatever skills you have, if you can use them to aid others, enlighten others, and motivate others, then I feel that that's something you should do. I really do pursue projects that really are about subject matter that we have to deal with. The last feature film I made, which is a very good film, and it's available, I guess, on Amazon, places like that. It's called Shot, and it's dealing with gun violence, and which is one of the most horrific things that we have in this country. Beyond belief compared to anywhere else in the world, the number of people we kill every single day by guns. So I wanted to make a movie that would potentially get an audience member, even a gun-owning audience member, to sort of say, wait, this could happen to me. I could get shot. And that's what the story's about. So again, if I can, I feel that's the avenue to use my talents. Now, I want to entertain because it's hard enough to entertain, but I want to do it in a form that potentially, I'll use the word, educates.
Speaking of maybe educating, certainly entertaining, you directed, co-wrote, and co-produced the 1994 film Roswell, about the famous alleged UFO crash and cover-up in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And you returned to similar subject matter when you directed an episode of the Steven Spielberg-produced miniseries Taken about alien abductions. And, I actually had a poster of Roswell in my bedroom during high school. I loved that movie. And I was genuinely fascinated by UFOs, extraterrestrials, abductions, conspiracies. That was very big in the culture at the time. And I'm kind of curious, what is your take on that phenomenon?
I didn't really even know what UFO stood for when I was told the story of one of my colleagues who I went to the AFI with, Paul Davids, who he and his children actually had seen a UFO. And it would sort of changed his life, and he's then found out about the Roswell story, told me, and then I sold that to HBO, and we made it again for Showtime later. I mean, I have not encountered a UFO. I've encountered lots of people who have. I've not had aliens abduct me or haven't encountered aliens. I've encountered people in both research who have. All kinds of animals and insects and sea creatures have sense capacities that are way beyond ours. They hear better, they see better, they literally feel, in terms of the sort of electromagnetic world that we're in, far more sophisticated than we do, and they're right here on this planet. So the idea that this planet is not the only planet, it's sort of impossible to sort of believe that if there are billions of galaxies and therefore gazillions of stars and planets with them, that this is the only one. Now, this one's pretty spectacular. And if we're not careful, this may be the only one that was like that that's no more. But the idea of interfacing, and I often look forward to sort of like, I do wish the aliens would, if they were beings, would sort of appear and remind us, just like that wonderful movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I don't know if you they made it a number of times. Robert Wise made the first one. And what was phenomenal about that movie was the alien was saying, you people are messing up the planet you're on. And if you continually do that, we're going to get rid of you because you're a danger. The idea of beings being able to awaken us to what we're doing to ourselves, that'd be a nice gift. So aliens, come on down and help here, would you? But of course, most of the time they're portrayed as obviously evil, except you must appreciate the whole Avatar series, because that one has got a much more positive image of other worlds.
So you've alluded a couple of times to, your background in educating, and, the fact that you started off, right, trying to get a PhD in education. What is your approach to teaching at the USC School of Cinematic Arts? Have you developed any specific tools or insights for teaching the next generation of filmmakers?
All of these people would like something remarkable to happen to them. And just in the pragmatics of it, it only happens to a few of them. So the question is, how can we give them a quote education that is of value. And one of the things that I say in one of the classes I teach is that I want you to see better than you see now. I want you to hear better than you hear now. I want you to be able to know what it is that you want. I want you to be able to know how to get what you want. I want you to know when you've gotten what you want. And I want you to know why you wanted it in the first place. Those are the things that we and I particularly emphasize. And I often also say to filmmakers, the film you're making is the only film you're going to make. Meaning that if you're making a 5-minute movie, don't make a 5-minute movie in the anticipation that tomorrow or 5 years from now, you'll make a feature film. Make that 5-minute movie as the best that you can do and regard it as the only thing you're going to do. And in that sense, what happens is you get in the present. And that also is something that is really essential. It's essential, by the way, to be a good filmmaker, because you have to really be present to do it. You really do have to see and hear better. And I immediately show my students how they don't see what's in front of them. And it's shocking to them because it gets proven. And they go, what? I didn't see that? Yeah, you didn't. Now, how can we hone your skills so that you can see that? I was the artistic director for a while up at Robert Redford's Sundance Institute, of the Sundance Lab. And one of the things that Bob would always say to all these filmmakers was, it's about process, it's not about the product. And that's a sort of profound idea. We'd even, he say it over and over again, and we, boy, process. But if you get that, that means you're in the moment. And to be a good artist, particularly as a storytelling artist, you have to be in that moment, in this moment. And that is one of the things that we also are encouraging and showing ways to do that.
Along those lines, earlier you mentioned the book series that you've done, Directors Close Up, where you interview directors nominated for Best Film by the Directors Guild of America. And I wonder if you can share maybe some of the people, some of the directors that you did interview, and some of the things that maybe you learned from them that would be of value to kind of following along those lines to anyone, filmmakers or otherwise, some brilliant insights like the ones you just shared.
Well, there are literally so many. Sometimes I just pull out a copy of the book and just read a sentence, and it'll be enough to sort of like to change, because these books are filled with obviously the experience and the insight, and in many cases the wisdom of, you name it, Steven Spielberg, Ang Lee, and Daniels, you name a filmmaker, and that filmmaker has been up on that interview process. Pick a page number. Let's do this. Pick a page number.
Joe, you got a page number?
Pick a page. Any page.
41.
41. Okay, this is good. This is from the first group. We're going to take a look at 41. Oh, this is good. This is Andrew Davis, who did the Fugitive. Good movie. And he says, The Fugitive had been in development for many years. There were lots of permutations of different drafts. The question was, how could you say no to working with someone like Harrison Ford? Because you knew it would be opening the doors, and all of a sudden you would become acceptable as a director in every area. But there were certain key things that were critical to me to change, to make the script work, and I had to do them. So here's some. Pick one more number. Just for the fun of it, pick another number.
87.
87. Let's see. This is 87. This is from the most recent version. Let's see what we got here. See if there's some insight here that's going to come from 87. This is David Fincher talking about social network. We went to Harvard, and it was a little disheartening because the script was actually so contained, and the story takes place over 6 square blocks. And I thought, this is too easy. We'll go to Harvard, and they'll say yes, and we'll shoot here, and we'll be done in October. That didn't happen. We tried everything. And to be fair, it's a little bit of the hottest girl in the room. Like I'm probably going to say no, but take a swing. So they tell you up front, there's no chance, but let's see you dance. So we tried every kind of inroad, and eventually they came back and just said, Two trees died during the filming of Love Story, and we would never want that to happen again. So no Harvard. So you just have to keep going. Perseverance is the thing. Perseverance.
There's even a certain, storytelling aspect, I think, to some of those answers, and definitely some great insights. I'm going to have to pick up some of those volumes.
They're good books. They're a lot of fun to read. I actually think that they in many ways are the best books about directing, because look, the way that books are put together is from the point of view of someone who directs. And since that's what I do, when I talk to these people, it's not like they're talking to journalists. It's like they're talking to somebody who knows what it is to be in that situation and lose a location, and knows what it is to sort of have a casting problem, how to deal with it. So there's a generosity that comes from these conversations that is kind of rare. And that's why I think these books are so good.
Jeremy, are there any current creative endeavors you'd like to tell us about?
So I've been very fortunate because I run something called the Change Making Media Lab. And what we do is we make short pieces for various NGOs. Last year, we made 3 videos for what's called Vaccinate LA, which was encouraging at-risk communities to take the vaccine. So this is an active filmmaking process for me. I'm right in there doing it. And obviously teaching has been an incredible experience because I get to be with other filmmakers and help them in their process of making their movies. So I'm extremely active compared to, by the way, to some contemporaries of mine who are very, very talented, who they're not teaching and they're certainly not getting jobs in Hollywood.
Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us and sharing with us. It's been a real pleasure.
No, I'm glad. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm glad I was able to share with you.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.